When I first started my business, I was broke, tired, and unsure of myself. But today, I can proudly say that my company is a seven-figure business. This is the story of how I turned my life around and built something from nothing. I graduated from college with a degree in marketing, and while my peers were securing well-paying jobs in corporate offices, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was always the kind of person who wanted to do something on my own, but I didn't know where to start. I tried a few side hustles, selling things on eBay, starting a blog, flipping furniture, but nothing stuck. I was constantly chasing shiny objects, but nothing seemed to resonate with me. One night, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post from a woman who had built a successful online business. She was selling digital products, like ebooks and online courses, and making a living doing it. Something clicked. This was it. I wanted to do something like that. I had no idea what I would sell or how to get started, but I knew I had to try. The next day, I started doing research. I watched YouTube videos, read articles, and listened to podcasts. I learned about dropshipping, affiliate marketing, and digital products. But the more I learned, the more overwhelmed I became. There were so many options, and I had no experience in any of these areas. I had no idea where to start, and the self-doubt started creeping in. Who was I to think I could build a successful business? But then I had an epiphany. I didn't need to be an expert. I didn't need to have everything figured out. I just needed to start. I needed to stop overthinking and take action. So, I decided to take the plunge and start a business selling digital products. I didn't have much money to invest, so I focused on creating low-cost digital products, like ebooks and templates. I started with something I knew: social media marketing. I had experience running social media accounts for a few small businesses, and I figured I could create a simple guide on how to grow your Instagram account. It was nothing groundbreaking, but it was something I was passionate about, and I felt confident I could create a product people would find valuable. I spent weeks writing the ebook, designing the layout, and figuring out how to set up a website. I didn't know how to build a website, so I used WordPress and a simple theme. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I launched the product with a small email list I'd built through social media, and I made my first sale within a week. It was a small win, but it felt huge. For the first time, I realized that I could actually make money from something I created. But even though I made a few sales, things didn't take off immediately. I was still working my full-time job and spending my nights and weekends working on my business. I didn't have much time, and I was constantly juggling multiple projects. The stress of working a full-time job while trying to build a business was overwhelming. There were nights when I would get home from work, sit down at my desk, and feel exhausted. I would stare at the screen, unsure of what to do next. The doubt would creep in, and I would wonder if this was all just a pipe dream. But then something unexpected happened. I received an email from a potential customer asking if I offered one-on-one coaching. I hadn't even considered that idea, but the email sparked something in me. Maybe this could be the next step. Maybe I could start offering coaching services to help people grow their businesses, like the woman who inspired me. I started offering coaching sessions to a few people who bought my products, and it was a game changer. Not only did I get to help people directly, but I also learned so much about their pain points and challenges. I started using that feedback to improve my products and create new ones. My business began to grow, and with it, my confidence. A few months later, I quit my full-time job to focus on my business full-time. It was one of the scariest decisions I've ever made. I had no idea if my business would sustain me, but I knew that I had to go all in. The first few months were tough. I had to hustle every single day. There were days when I would wake up early, work through lunch, and stay up late to finish projects. I had no one to answer to accept myself, and that pressure pushed me to work harder than I ever had before. The real turning point came when I launched my first online course. It was something I had been working on for months, a course on social media marketing for small businesses. I was nervous about whether anyone would buy it, but to my surprise, the launch was a success. I made more in 1 week than I had in the past few months. That success gave me the momentum I needed to keep going. Over time, I started scaling my business. I invested in ads to reach a wider audience, and I began outsourcing tasks to virtual assistants and contractors. I created more digital products like templates, workbooks, and printables. I started a podcast to share my knowledge and build my brand. The income from my business grew exponentially, and within a year, I was making more money than I ever had in my 9-to-5 job. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were setbacks. I made mistakes, like spending money on ads that didn't work or creating products that didn't sell as well as I expected. There were times when I felt like giving up, when I thought I had made the wrong choice. But every time I faced a setback, I reminded myself of why I started. I reminded myself of how far I had come and how much I had learned. I wasn't going to let failure stop me. Today, my business is a seven-figure company. I've helped thousands of people start and grow their businesses, and I'm living the life I always dreamed of. But the journey hasn't been easy. It's been filled with self-doubt, fear, and failure. But I've learned that the key to success isn't avoiding mistakes, it's learning from them and never giving up. If you're reading this and you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: start. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for everything to be figured out. Just take the first step. You'll make mistakes, you'll face challenges, but if you keep going, you will eventually get there. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I never expected my journey to start in a small, dusty room with nothing but a laptop, some notebooks, and an overwhelming amount of doubt. But that's exactly where I found myself in the summer of 2018. I was broke, stuck in a dead-end job, and struggling with the feeling that I had wasted my potential. I was in my mid-20s, with student loans, no savings, and no idea what I was doing with my life. The world seemed like a maze, and I was just stumbling around, hoping for a way out. The job I had at the time was soul-crushing. I worked as a junior copywriter for a small marketing agency, churning out content for clients that I didn't care about. My boss was a micromanager who couldn't understand why I wasn't excited to write about plumbing services and home insurance. The work was repetitive, uninspiring, and I could see the clock ticking down every day. I knew I couldn't stay there forever, but every time I thought about leaving, I became paralyzed by fear. What if I failed? What if there were no other opportunities? What if I just wasn't good enough? But then, something changed. It happened on a random Tuesday when I was walking to work. I remember it vividly because the sky was unusually clear and the air felt fresh. I overheard a conversation between two people about an online business. One of them was explaining how they had built an entire company from scratch, all while working part-time. That conversation planted a seed in my mind. What if I could do something similar? What if I could build a business that allowed me to escape the corporate grind and work on something I was passionate about? That day, I went home, fired up my laptop, and started researching. I dove into every article, podcast, and YouTube video I could find on entrepreneurship, online businesses, and personal development. The more I learned, the more excited I became. I knew I had to give it a shot, even if it meant leaving the safety of my job. But there was a problem. I had no idea what kind of business to start. Everything I read told me to find your passion, but I had no clue what mine was. I didn't want to sell something I didn't believe in, but I also didn't want to waste time on something that would never work. I spent weeks brainstorming, trying to figure out what I could offer the world. Eventually, I landed on a niche that seemed like a good fit for my skills: content creation and digital marketing. I had been writing for years, and I had developed a strong understanding of SEO and social media strategies through my day job. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something I was good at, and I figured I could help small businesses with their online presence. So I decided to take the plunge and start my own digital marketing agency. The first few months were brutal. I had no clients, no experience, and no reputation. I spent countless hours cold emailing potential clients, networking on LinkedIn, and cold calling small businesses in my area. Most of the time, I was met with rejection or indifference, but I kept going. I knew I had to keep pushing, even when it felt like nothing was happening. There were days when I questioned my decision. I thought about going back to my old job, where at least I had a paycheck and some stability. But I refused to give up. Then, something unexpected happened. One day, after weeks of silence, I received an email from a local restaurant that had seen my work online. They were looking for help with their social media marketing and wanted to know if I could come in for a meeting. I couldn't believe it. This was my first real lead, and I was terrified. I had no idea what I was doing, but I went in anyway, armed with a PowerPoint presentation I had barely put together the night before. To my surprise, the meeting went well. They liked my ideas, and after some back and forth, I secured my first client. I was ecstatic. It wasn't a huge contract, but it was a start. I threw myself into the project, working late into the night to deliver results. Within a few months, the restaurant started seeing real improvements in their online presence. They got more engagement on their posts, their website traffic increased, and their reservations went up. I was doing it. I was really doing it. That first client was the breakthrough I needed. Word spread quickly, and soon I was getting more inquiries from other small businesses. I refined my processes, learned from my mistakes, and continued to build my portfolio. The more clients I worked with, the more confident I became. I wasn't just some freelancer anymore. I was building a real business. By the end of 2019, my agency had grown to the point where I could quit my day job and go full-time. It felt surreal, but it also felt like a natural next step. I had made it. Or at least, that's what I thought. What came next was a whole new set of challenges. As the business grew, so did the pressure. I had to hire a team, manage cash flow, deal with client demands, and juggle a million different tasks every day. There were months when I barely slept, weeks when I doubted myself, and times when I wondered if I had bitten off more than I could chew. But through it all, I kept my eyes on the prize. I kept reminding myself why I started this in the first place, to build something that was mine, something that would give me the freedom to live life on my own terms. Fast forward to today, and my agency is now a six-figure business with a small but dedicated team. We've worked with dozens of clients, from local businesses to larger enterprises. We've even expanded our services to include web development, branding, and content strategy. But the journey hasn't been without its setbacks. There have been days when I felt like everything was falling apart. I've had clients who didn't pay on time, staff turnover, and the constant pressure to keep growing. But every challenge has made me stronger and more resilient. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. I still have a long way to go, and I know that entrepreneurship is a never-ending ride of ups and downs. But I'm no longer the person who walked into that dusty room in 2018, unsure of what to do next. I'm someone who has built something from the ground up, and that's a feeling I'll never take for granted. If there's one thing I've learned along the way, it's this: success doesn't happen overnight. It takes persistence, patience, and the willingness to keep going when everyone else would give up. If you're thinking about starting your own business, don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be a perfect moment. Just start, learn as you go, and keep pushing forward. You never know where it will take you. I started my business with absolutely nothing. No savings, no investors, no contacts in the industry, and most importantly, no experience. All I had was an idea, some drive, and a willingness to take risks. Today, I run a successful tech company, but the path to success was anything but straightforward. This is the story of how I went from being a broke college dropout to becoming the CEO of a seven-figure business. It all began during my sophomore year in college. I had always been the kind of person who was constantly thinking of new ideas, usually for apps or online businesses. I had no formal business training, and I wasn't even sure how to code. But what I did know was that I didn't want to follow the traditional route of getting a corporate job after graduation. I wanted something more. I wanted to build something from the ground up. One night, I was working on a project for class, trying to figure out how to build a website. It was a simple e-commerce project, but it gave me my first taste of entrepreneurship. I quickly realized how powerful it could be to sell products or services online, and the thought of running my own online business took root in my mind. I became obsessed. By the end of the semester, I was spending more time thinking about my business ideas than my coursework. I had a few failed attempts at starting online ventures. One was a blog that never gained any traction, and another was an online store that couldn't compete with the big players. But I didn't give up. I learned from each failure and adjusted my approach. I didn't have the luxury of a safety net. If I wanted to succeed, I had to figure it out on my own. I decided to focus on the tech space because I saw how rapidly things were changing in that industry. I spent months learning about the startup ecosystem, reading books, listening to podcasts, and following successful entrepreneurs. I also learned how to code through online courses. It wasn't easy. I was constantly frustrated, but I kept pushing forward because I knew this was my path. After a year of self-education and working on various side projects, I stumbled upon an idea that felt different. It was a simple app that could help businesses automate their customer service by using AI chatbots. At the time, this was a pretty novel idea, and it felt like the right market to tap into. I didn't have any technical partners or funding, so I knew I had to bootstrap it myself. I started working on the app in my spare time while still in college. I spent late nights coding and designing the user interface. I was living on ramen noodles and spending my weekends at the library trying to learn everything I could about app development and marketing. I had no idea what I was doing, but I kept pushing forward. The first version of the app was clunky and far from perfect, but it worked. I decided to launch it on Product Hunt, hoping to get some initial traction. To my surprise, it actually took off. Within a week, I had my first paying customers, small businesses who were looking for a more affordable solution to customer service automation. The feedback was positive, and people were willing to pay for it. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was validation. People wanted this product. That's when I knew I had something. But it wasn't smooth sailing from there. I had to figure out how to scale the business with very little money and no outside funding. I didn't have a marketing budget, so I turned to social media and content marketing. I wrote blog posts, did podcasts, and reached out to influencers in the tech space. Slowly, things started to snowball. But then came the real test, getting the business off the ground without any financial backing. I didn't have money to hire developers or designers, so I kept building the product myself. I also didn't have the resources to hire a team, so I did everything: customer support, marketing, product development. There were nights when I barely slept, waking up at 3 a.m. to fix bugs in the app or answer customer queries. The biggest challenge I faced was managing my time. I was juggling a full-time college schedule with my growing business. I was constantly stressed, and there were days when I felt like I was on the verge of burnout. But I kept reminding myself that this was the only chance I'd get to prove myself. I had no backup plan. It was do or die. After about a year, I started to gain some traction. I had a steady stream of paying customers, and the feedback I was receiving allowed me to iterate on the product. I began to see growth, and I could finally afford to bring on a few contractors to help with marketing and customer support. This was a huge turning point. The company started running more smoothly, and I felt a sense of relief. But success didn't come overnight. It took years of hard work, trial and error, and pushing myself beyond my limits. I had to learn how to manage a team, how to deal with customer complaints, how to scale the business, and most importantly, how to deal with failure. There were times when I thought I might lose everything, and there were moments when I felt like giving up. But I kept going. By the time I graduated from college, my app had gained enough traction to attract the attention of investors. After a few rounds of pitching, I finally secured funding, which allowed me to hire a full-time team and accelerate our growth. The funding wasn't the end-all be-all, but it gave me the resources to take my business to the next level. Fast forward to today, and I'm the CEO of a 7-figure business that helps thousands of companies automate their customer service. We've expanded our product offerings, brought on a talented team, and grown our customer base to hundreds of clients across multiple industries. I never could have imagined that the little idea I had back in college would turn into this. I'm not going to lie, entrepreneurship is hard. It's mentally, physically, and emotionally draining. There are days when you question everything, and the road ahead seems impossible. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: success isn't about having the perfect plan or the best product. It's about persistence. It's about showing up every day, even when things seem bleak, and doing the work even when you don't feel like it. And most importantly, it's about not giving up on your vision. If you're reading this and you're just starting out, my advice is simple: don't wait for the perfect time or the perfect plan. Start now and keep going. The road will be tough, but if you stay committed to your vision, you'll get there. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest where dreams were often limited to what the small community could see. My parents, both hardworking individuals, ran a local grocery store. It wasn't glamorous by any means, but they worked hard and ensured that we never went without. From a young age, I knew that I didn't want the same life. I wanted more adventure, more freedom, and more money. Little did I know, my journey to those things would be anything but easy. After high school, I moved to the city to attend a state college. I was a bright-eyed 18-year-old, full of ambition, with no real idea of what I wanted to do, but knowing that I couldn't just go back to running a small-town grocery store. I majored in business, thinking it would give me the tools to one day start my own company. But in reality, I spent most of my time partying and trying to figure out who I was. I had a few small jobs here and there, one as a barista, another as a part-time waiter. But nothing really clicked for me. I often found myself daydreaming about what life would be like if I had my own business, my own rules, my own success. At the time, though, those were just fantasies. That was until I got an internship at a tech startup my junior year. It wasn't glamorous work. I was essentially the go-fair for the CEO, running errands, organizing meetings, and taking notes at conferences. But there was something about being in the middle of it all that ignited something inside me. I saw people working on projects that would change the world. I saw people who were passionate and driven, and it lit a fire in me. I wanted that. I didn't want to be a cog in the machine. I wanted to be the machine. After my internship ended, I took a big leap. I dropped out of college. I know, it sounds crazy, especially in a world where a degree often feels like a golden ticket. But I knew that the traditional path wasn't for me. I didn't need a piece of paper to tell me I was capable. I needed experience, and I needed to take risks. With just a few $100 in my pocket, I moved to Silicon Valley. It was a massive gamble. I didn't know anyone, didn't have a job lined up, and didn't even have an apartment. But I was determined. My first few months were rough. I lived in a tiny studio apartment that smelled like mildew, and I ate ramen noodles every night. I spent my days emailing and networking, trying to get my foot in the door of the startup world. But, unsurprisingly, doors were closed. Every company I reached out to either never replied or rejected me. I was starting to wonder if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Then one day, I got an email from a company I had applied to months ago. They wanted me to come in for an interview. I could hardly believe it. I put on my best suit, one I had borrowed from a friend, and went to the interview with a mix of excitement and dread. The company was a small software development startup, and they needed someone to help manage their social media and marketing. The interview went well. I had no real experience in marketing, but I had learned everything I could from my time at the tech startup, plus everything I had read online. The CEO, a 30-something-year-old named Mark, seemed impressed with my drive and energy. After the interview, he told me they were considering a few candidates, but he would keep me in mind. A week later, I got the job offer. It wasn't much at first, just enough to cover my rent and bills, but it was a start. The first few months at the new job were a blur. I worked long hours, learning everything I could about marketing, software development, and the ins and outs of running a business. I didn't have much free time, but I didn't mind. I was learning, and I was determined to prove myself. But there was a problem. The company was struggling. Despite the talent and ambition of the team, we just couldn't gain traction. Our product was good, but we weren't getting enough users. Mark, the CEO, was frustrated. One day, he pulled me aside and asked me to come up with a new marketing strategy. He had been trying to go the traditional route, but it wasn't working. At first, I was nervous. I had no formal marketing education, just a passion for technology and a willingness to work hard. But then it hit me. What if we didn't market to the traditional tech crowd? What if we marketed to a completely different group? I proposed we target small business owners, people who could use our software to streamline their operations. Mark liked the idea, and I ran with it. I created a new social media campaign, leveraging influencers and small business owners to spread the word. We also offered free trials to get people to try the software without any commitment. Slowly but surely, we started gaining traction. Users started to sign up, and the product began to take off. As the company grew, so did my role. I moved from marketing to business development, helping to secure new partnerships and deals. The startup went from struggling to thriving, and I was right there in the middle of it all. In just a few years, the company was acquired by a larger tech firm, and I found myself sitting on a nice chunk of change. But even with all that success, I wasn't satisfied. I had learned a ton at the startup, but I knew I could do it on my own. The idea for my own company had been brewing for a while, and I finally took the plunge. I started a company that provided software solutions for small businesses, similar to what we had done before, but with my own spin on it. It wasn't easy. There were countless failures, mistakes, and moments where I thought about throwing in the towel. But each failure taught me something, and eventually, I found the right formula. My company grew quickly, attracting attention from investors and business owners alike. A few years later, my company was worth millions. I had gone from a broke college dropout to a successful entrepreneur. But looking back, it wasn't just the money or the success that mattered most. It was the journey, the late nights, the hard lessons, the moments of doubt, and the relentless pursuit of a dream. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: success doesn't come easily, and it doesn't happen overnight. But if you're willing to take risks, learn from your mistakes, and never give up, anything is possible. I'll be honest with you. When I started my business, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have any formal business training, and I didn't have a ton of savings to back me up. But I had something more powerful than that: determination. I was a college dropout with a vision, a desire to make something out of nothing, and the drive to make it happen. Fast forward 5 years, and my startup now brings in 7 figures annually. Here's the story of how I went from nothing to a successful entrepreneur in an industry that I had zero experience in. It all started when I was in college. I had been struggling with school. I hated it. The lectures felt like a waste of time, and the assignments felt like they were just there to keep me busy. I knew deep down that this path wasn't for me. I wanted to build something. I wanted to create something that would matter. So, I made the decision to drop out of college and take the plunge into the world of entrepreneurship. I'll admit, my parents were not thrilled with my decision. They thought I was making a huge mistake, and honestly, so did I at first. I didn't have a solid plan when I dropped out. I didn't know exactly what kind of business I wanted to start, but I knew I wanted to create something in the tech space. I was fascinated by how rapidly technology was evolving and how new products were changing the way people live their daily lives. I thought, I could do that. I could create something that people need. I didn't have the technical expertise, so I started small. I began learning how to code online through free resources and tutorials. I spent every spare moment learning new programming languages, figuring out how to build websites, and experimenting with simple apps. While I was doing that, I started reading books about entrepreneurship, listening to podcasts, and absorbing as much information as I could. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't easy. But every night, I worked hard to build a foundation that I could grow on. At the time, I was living in a small apartment with my 2 roommates. We barely had enough money to pay rent, but I spent my days working on my startup ideas and my nights coding. I remember one night, after working for hours on a mobile app that I thought would be the next big thing, my computer crashed. I lost everything. All the work I had put in was gone. That was one of the lowest points in my journey. I seriously considered giving up, but something inside me refused to quit. I started over. I learned from my mistakes and got better. After a few months of experimenting with different app ideas, I finally landed on a product that seemed to have potential. It was a simple app that helped small businesses create and send newsletters to their customers. At the time, many small businesses were struggling to create effective marketing campaigns, and I thought this could be a way to help them. I didn't have money to advertise or hire a team, so I went all in on social media marketing. I began creating content, doing giveaways, and reaching out to potential users. Slowly but surely, I started getting some traction. The first customer I got felt like a huge victory. It was a small win, but it proved that I wasn't just spinning my wheels. People were willing to pay for the product. But success didn't come quickly or easily. For the first year, I worked around the clock. I was doing everything: coding, marketing, customer service, all by myself. The business was growing, but I was burning out. There were days when I barely slept, eating fast food and chugging energy drinks just to keep my eyes open. I was living on a shoestring budget, and everything I made went right back into the business. Despite the exhaustion and stress, I was determined to make it work. My efforts started to pay off. The product began to get noticed, and I landed a few larger clients. That's when I knew things were starting to turn around. But there was still so much to do. I had to figure out how to scale the business and keep up with demand. It wasn't until the second year that I brought on my first hire. I couldn't do it all alone anymore, and I knew I needed help. I found a developer who could help me improve the app's functionality and fix some of the bugs that had been bothering users. This was a game changer. Having a team member allowed me to focus more on growth and less on the day-to-day technical details. By year 3, the business had grown to the point where I could no longer handle everything myself. I started hiring more people, bringing on a marketing team, a customer support team, and even a few interns to help with administrative tasks. Our customer base grew exponentially, and so did our revenue. The real breakthrough came when we decided to offer more than just newsletters. We started adding features that allowed businesses to better understand their customer base, track email engagement, and improve their marketing strategies. This shift opened up new opportunities, and soon we were working with larger companies as well. The revenue went from being just enough to cover expenses to being able to reinvest into new features and new hires. But with success came its own set of problems. As the business grew, I had to learn how to manage people and handle conflict. There were times when team members didn't agree with each other, and there were moments when I had to make tough decisions about who to keep on the team. It was a learning experience that I had never expected. Fast forward to today, and the business is thriving. We've expanded our product offerings, and we've secured partnerships with some major companies. We have a team of 20 full-time employees, and we've scaled internationally. I now have a much better understanding of what it takes to run a business, and while there's still so much to learn, I feel confident in the foundation we've built. Looking back, the journey hasn't been easy. There have been countless sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and times when I thought I was going to fail. But I've learned that the key to success isn't about avoiding failure. It's about pushing through it and learning from it. If I had given up after my first failure, or the time I lost all my work, I wouldn't be where I am today. For anyone thinking of starting their own business, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment, the perfect idea, or the perfect team. Just start. There will be setbacks, and there will be moments where you'll question everything. But if you're passionate about your vision, and you're willing to put in the work, you can make it happen. Now, looking at my business, I can say I'm proud of what we've built. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth every bit of effort. And to think it all started because I had an idea and refused to give up on it. This is the story of how I went from being a broke college dropout to owning a multi-million-dollar business. It's been a roller coaster, filled with moments of doubt, frustration, and failure, but it's also been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. To give you some context, I dropped out of college after my second year. I wasn't cut out for the traditional education system. I knew that I didn't want to work a 9-to-5 job, and I had a strong desire to build something of my own. My parents, of course, were horrified. They had invested a lot of money in my education, and here I was, walking away from it all to chase an uncertain dream. But I wasn't scared. I had this burning belief that I was meant to do something bigger than just show up for lectures and take exams. I didn't have a backup plan. I didn't have any real skills or knowledge in business, but I had an idea. I was obsessed with tech and startups, so I decided to build an app. At the time, I had no idea what it would be, but I knew I wanted to create something that could help people. I started researching and learning how to code, teaching myself through online tutorials and free courses. I had no formal experience, but I was determined to figure it out. During that time, I lived in a small, rundown apartment, with barely enough money to pay rent. I spent most of my days glued to my computer, coding and coming up with new ideas. My friends and family thought I was crazy. "Why don't you get a job?" they'd say. "You'll never make it as an entrepreneur." I didn't listen to them. I couldn't. I was all in. After a few months of hard work, I came up with an idea for an app that would allow users to easily book appointments with local service providers, like hairdressers, dentists, and personal trainers. The idea seemed simple, but it filled a gap in the market. There were apps for booking appointments in large businesses like spas and hotels, but nothing tailored for smaller service providers. I pitched the idea to a few potential investors, but most of them turned me down. One investor, however, showed interest. He didn't want to fund the whole project, but agreed to give me a small investment to get started. With that money, I hired a freelancer to help me build the app. I was still doing everything else myself: coding, marketing, customer support, but the app was starting to take shape. As soon as we launched the beta version, things started to move fast. We had a steady stream of users signing up, and they seemed to love the app. But there was a big problem. The app wasn't making any money. We weren't charging for appointments yet, and the free version wasn't sustainable. It was frustrating, to say the least. I had invested so much time and money into this project, and it felt like all my efforts were going to waste. I didn't give up, though. Instead, I pivoted. I realized that the market for appointment booking was saturated, and there wasn't much room for growth. But there was something else I noticed. A lot of the service providers using the app were struggling with managing their schedules, taking payments, and keeping track of clients. That's when the idea hit me. We could build an all-in-one platform that not only allowed users to book appointments, but also helped service providers manage their businesses more effectively. This shift in focus was a game changer. I worked day and night to update the app and launch new features. I started charging a small fee for the service, and that's when we saw our first real revenue. It wasn't much at first, just a few $100s a month, but it was enough to keep me going. It was proof that this could work. As the app gained traction, I started reinvesting every penny we made back into the business. I hired more people, improved the app's functionality, and started building a brand. Slowly but surely, our customer base grew, and we were able to secure larger clients. The real turning point came when we landed a partnership with a major fitness chain. They were looking for a way to streamline their booking system, and our app was the perfect solution. From there, things really started to take off. We gained more users, more customers, and more partnerships. The revenue started to grow exponentially. By year 2, we had hit $1 million in revenue. I couldn't believe it. I had gone from struggling to pay my rent to building a business worth millions. But even then, it wasn't all smooth sailing. As we scaled, we faced new challenges. There were technical problems, customer service nightmares, and a never-ending pressure to stay ahead of the competition. There were days when I thought about quitting. There were nights when I stayed awake, unable to sleep, wondering if I had made the right decision. But every time I faced a setback, I reminded myself why I started in the first place. I was building something meaningful. I was creating a product that people loved, and I was doing it on my own terms. That kept me going. By the end of year 3, our company was generating over $5 million in revenue, and we had expanded internationally. We had offices in 3 countries, and we were working with clients from all over the world. I was living the dream, but I still felt the pressure. I had built this business from the ground up, and I couldn't afford to lose it. Fast forward to today, and we're doing better than I ever imagined. Our revenue is well over $10 million, and we've expanded into new industries. We've built a strong team, and I've learned how to delegate effectively and trust the people around me. I'm no longer the college dropout trying to figure it out on my own. I'm the CEO of a successful company that's changing the way businesses manage their operations. Looking back, I can see how far I've come. But it hasn't been easy. There have been countless sleepless nights, tough decisions, and moments when I thought I couldn't continue. But each time, I pushed through. And now, I'm reaping the rewards of all that hard work. If there's one piece of advice I could give to anyone who wants to start their own business, it's this. Keep going, even when it seems impossible. There will be times when you feel like giving up, but those are the moments that will shape your success. The road is long, but if you stay persistent, it will be worth it. I've always been the kind of person who believed in hard work, determination, and the idea that success doesn't come easy. But it wasn't until I experienced the harshest failure of my life that I truly understood what it meant to be an entrepreneur. Let me take you back a few years. I was fresh out of college, armed with a degree in business, some idealistic dreams, and a hunger to make something of myself. I didn't want to work a 9-to-5 job. I wanted to build something from the ground up, something that would not only provide for me, but also create jobs and impact the lives of others. The typical entrepreneurial dreams. I didn't know it at the time, but I was about to face one of the toughest lessons of my life. My first business idea came from a conversation I had with a friend. We were sitting at a coffee shop, sipping our drinks and discussing the frustrations we felt about the lack of high-quality yet affordable fitness equipment available in our city. We didn't want to shell out thousands of dollars for gym memberships, but we also didn't want to settle for the cheap, poorly made equipment that flooded the market. That's when the idea for a fitness equipment rental service came up. The concept was simple: offer premium, well-maintained fitness equipment for rent. People could get access to top-tier machines and gear at a fraction of the cost of buying them. It would be perfect for those who wanted to stay fit but didn't want to commit to a full gym membership or buy expensive equipment that would gather dust after a few months. I took the idea seriously. I started researching the market, making a business plan, and calculating the costs. After a few months, I had a rough outline of what the business could look like. I'd need an initial investment to purchase the equipment, a website, and a marketing campaign. But more than anything, I'd need a strategy to get the word out. In hindsight, that was where I went wrong. I jumped into the venture without fully understanding the logistics and challenges that would follow. I had some savings from part-time jobs during college, but not nearly enough to cover the startup costs. So, like any determined entrepreneur, I turned to friends and family for funding. I convinced my parents to loan me a chunk of their savings and secured a small loan from a friend. At the time, I was full of confidence. I thought, I've got this. How hard could it be? The first few months went well. I managed to secure a small space, stocked it with some mid-range fitness equipment, and launched a website. I marketed the business as best as I could, using social media and word of mouth. Slowly but surely, customers started trickling in. My first few rentals were a success. I felt on top of the world. But then, as time went on, I started to realize how much of a gamble this was. The first issue was the wear and tear on the equipment. I hadn't anticipated just how quickly gym equipment could deteriorate with regular use. Each time I sent out a machine, I had to account for maintenance and repairs. And if anything broke while in the customer's hands, I had to either replace it or offer a refund, which was a huge hit to my profits. Then came the logistics. Moving large pieces of equipment back and forth between clients wasn't as simple as I had imagined. I had to hire a team to handle deliveries and pickups, which meant additional salaries and expenses. And let me tell you, managing a fleet of equipment rentals is no easy task. Coordinating the logistics was like juggling flaming knives. At first, everything was manageable, but soon the knives started falling. The real blow came when I noticed that my customers were returning the equipment in worse condition than when it was delivered. I had initially charged a modest deposit for damages, but that wasn't enough to cover the repairs and replacements. I had to increase the deposit amount, which deterred potential clients, and at the same time, I was losing trust from the few loyal customers I had left. Despite my best efforts, the money started running out. My parents' loan, the money from friends, and the small loans I'd taken out were quickly evaporating. The credit card bills piled up, and soon, I was struggling to keep up with rent, employee salaries, and other business expenses. It was only a matter of time before I had to face the harsh reality. My dream was crumbling. In my desperation, I turned to online forums and communities for advice, hoping to find a miracle that would save my business. I read hundreds of success stories and tips from other entrepreneurs who had been in similar situations. A common thread in many of these stories was the concept of pivoting, changing your business model or product to adapt to new circumstances. I realized I needed to rethink my approach. So, after a lot of soul-searching and late nights, I decided to pivot my business model. I couldn't afford the large-scale operation I had originally envisioned, but what I could do was scale it down and focus on a niche market. Instead of offering all types of fitness equipment, I narrowed my focus to a single category: high-end yoga and Pilates equipment. It was less expensive, and there was still a growing demand for it in the wellness community. I also started renting out equipment on a subscription basis, which helped with cash flow and allowed me to maintain a more predictable revenue stream. I revamped the website, cutting costs on things that weren't working, and invested heavily in social media ads targeting yoga and Pilates enthusiasts. The pivot wasn't an immediate success, but it was a start. Slowly, things began to improve. The revenue was still modest, but it was consistent. I made enough to cover the bills, repair the equipment, and keep the business running. I also learned how to be more frugal and strategic with my spending. The lessons I learned from my failures were invaluable. I learned to plan for the unexpected, how to manage cash flow, and how to stay lean during tough times. Fast forward a year. The business is still going, but it's a completely different animal than what I had originally imagined. I'm not making millions, but I'm making enough to support myself and the small team I've managed to keep. I've also built a community of loyal customers who trust my brand. Most importantly, I'm no longer living paycheck to paycheck, and I've regained my confidence. The hardest part of being an entrepreneur isn't the failures. It's the ability to keep going after those failures, to learn from them, and to adapt. There were so many moments when I felt like giving up, when I wanted to throw in the towel and go back to a safe 9-to-5 job. But now, looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. If I could give one piece of advice to aspiring entrepreneurs, it would be this: don't expect instant success. Expect failure, but don't let it define you. Learn from it. Pivot if you have to. And never give up. The road to success is never straight. It's filled with twists, turns, and detours. But if you keep your eyes on the prize and push through, you just might make it to the other side. Now, every time I look at my small business and think about how far it's come, I'm reminded of how much I've grown and how much further I can go. Success isn't just about the end goal. It's about the journey, the lessons, and the resilience that gets you there. I'm 27 now and running a business that's making 6 figures a year, but it wasn't always like this. In fact, I started from rock bottom, with no money, no connections, and no idea what I was doing. What I did have was determination, a willingness to learn, and a relentless drive to build something meaningful. Here's how I went from broke and frustrated to owning a successful online business. Back in college, I was like most people, confused, unsure of what I wanted to do with my life, and constantly switching majors. I ended up dropping out after my sophomore year. I had no backup plan. I had no money saved up. And honestly, I didn't even know where to start. My parents were disappointed, and I felt like I was letting everyone down. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to follow the traditional path. I wasn't going to work some dead-end job just to make ends meet. I wanted to build something of my own. At first, I tried a bunch of different ideas, some of which were terrible. I tried dropshipping. I tried affiliate marketing. I even tried creating an online course about something I barely knew. Every time I thought I had figured it out, I would hit a wall. I'd pour time and money into something, only to watch it flop. But with every failure, I learned something new. I kept reading books, listening to podcasts, and talking to other entrepreneurs. Eventually, I realized that there was one common thread among the successful entrepreneurs I admired. They all had one thing they focused on. They didn't try to do everything. They found a niche and focused on it until they got it right. So, I decided to do the same. I had always been interested in personal finance and investing, but I had no formal training in the field. I started researching, reading everything I could, and learning from experts. One thing I noticed was that people struggled to understand basic financial concepts like budgeting, investing, and managing debt. That's when the idea for my business started to form. I decided to create an online platform that made personal finance easy to understand. It was a broad idea, but I figured I could narrow it down later. The first thing I did was build a website. I had no technical skills, so I hired a freelance web developer to help me. The whole process was frustrating because I didn't understand the technical side of things, but I kept pushing through. I would wake up early, work on the website all day, and then spend my nights learning more about personal finance and marketing. The first version of the website was a disaster. The design was horrible, the user experience was clunky, and I made every mistake you could think of. But I didn't let that stop me. I kept improving it, launching new features, and tweaking the content. I also started creating free content on social media to build an audience. It wasn't glamorous. I was working 14-hour days, getting no sleep, and seeing almost no return for my effort. One day, I had an idea for a blog post that would walk people through how to create a budget from scratch. I spent hours researching, writing, and editing the post. When I finally hit publish, I didn't expect much, but to my surprise, it started to get traction. People were sharing it, commenting on it, and asking for more. That was my first real breakthrough. It wasn't about the money yet, but I was building something that people cared about. As traffic grew, I started monetizing the website through affiliate marketing, ads, and offering paid courses. I remember the first time I made $100 in a day. It wasn't much, but it was validation. It was proof that I wasn't wasting my time. But the road to profitability wasn't smooth. I faced challenges, from technical issues with the website to dealing with negative feedback. And then, of course, there was the constant pressure of self-doubt. Some days, I thought I'd never make it. But I kept going because I was invested. Not just in the business, but in myself. The next big turning point came when I created a paid online course on personal finance for beginners. I poured my heart into it. I researched every module, designed workbooks, and made sure the course was something people could actually use. I launched it to my email list, and within the first 24 hours, I sold $2,000 worth of courses. It was surreal. I had finally created something of real value, and people were willing to pay for it. From there, things started to snowball. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business. I hired more freelancers, improved the website, and expanded my content offerings. The business grew slowly at first, but once I hit a critical mass, it started growing exponentially. I expanded into different aspects of personal finance, debt management, investing, retirement planning, and started offering group coaching and personalized financial plans. Fast forward to today, and my business is generating over 6 figures annually. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm incredibly proud of what I've built. I've been able to help thousands of people take control of their finances, and I've built a brand that people trust. I'm no longer living paycheck to paycheck, and I've been able to hire a small team to help me grow the business even further. More importantly, I've learned to delegate and trust others, something I used to struggle with. Looking back, I can't help but think about how far I've come. I've had failures, doubts, and setbacks, but I've also had wins that I never imagined. I still remember sitting in my tiny apartment, wondering if I would ever make it, but I didn't quit. And now, I can say with confidence that all of those sleepless nights and sacrifices were worth it. The biggest lesson I've learned in this journey is that success doesn't come overnight. It's the result of years of hard work, perseverance, and constant learning. If you're reading this and you're thinking about starting a business, know this: it won't be easy, but it will be worth it if you stick with it. My advice to anyone just starting out is this: start small, focus on one thing, And don't let the fear of failure hold you back. You'll have doubts. You'll make mistakes. But each failure is a lesson. Don't let them stop you. Keep going, even when it seems like the world is against you. Because one day, you'll look back and realize that all those little wins added up to something incredible. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I started my journey with nothing but a broken-down car and a burning desire to escape my 9-to-5 job that felt like a never-ending loop of monotony. I had been working in customer service for nearly 5 years, getting paid just enough to get by, but never really able to break free from the grind. Every day, I woke up dreading the hours that stretched ahead of me, and every night, I collapsed into bed thinking there must be more to life than this. One fateful evening, as I was scrolling through my phone while eating dinner in my cramped apartment, I came across a post in an entrepreneur forum about a man who had turned a small side hustle into a full-blown, million-dollar business. I was intrigued. This guy had started just like me, unsure, broke, and stuck in a job that didn't fulfill him. But he had found a way out. He had found a way to build a business. I read his story, and something clicked inside me. If he could do it, why couldn't I? I knew I had to take action, but I had no idea where to begin. I didn't have any specialized skills, and my savings account was far from impressive. But I didn't want to stay stuck. So I made a decision right then and there. I was going to start my own business, even if it meant taking a huge risk. The first thing I did was think about what I was good at. I had worked in customer service for years, and over time, I had become really good at solving problems, managing people, and multitasking. But none of that translated into a specific business idea. After much thought, I realized that there was a huge market for online tutoring. I could use my communication skills to teach others, and that would allow me to work from home and avoid the long hours spent in a dead-end office job. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. I didn't have any formal teaching experience, but I knew I could learn. I spent weeks researching how to set up an online tutoring business, reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and talking to other entrepreneurs who had started similar businesses. The more I learned, the more I realized that it was possible. I just had to go for it. I started small. I created a basic website with the little money I had saved up. I offered tutoring services for subjects that I was familiar with, mainly English and basic math. I figured I would start by offering lessons to friends and family, just to get some practice. To my surprise, people were interested. I got my first client within a week, and from there, things began to snowball. But it wasn't easy. I spent countless hours creating lesson plans, doing research, and trying to improve my teaching skills. I had to learn how to use video conferencing platforms and how to handle the technical side of running an online business. There were moments when I felt like giving up, when I'd lose a client, or when I'd make a mistake that cost me time and money. But every time I faced a setback, I reminded myself why I was doing this. I was building something that could change my life. The real breakthrough came when I started offering more specialized courses. I realized that tutoring wasn't just about teaching subjects, it was about solving real-world problems. So, I created courses for students preparing for specific exams and standardized tests, and I started offering personalized tutoring packages. That's when I saw a huge increase in demand. Parents wanted their kids to succeed, and students were looking for ways to improve their grades. My business began to grow exponentially. Within the first year, I had a steady stream of clients, and I was making more money than I had ever made working my office job. But there was still something missing. I knew I could do more. I had already expanded into group lessons and online workshops, but I wanted to reach a wider audience. So, I invested in marketing. I used social media platforms to promote my services, and I started running ads targeting people who were looking for tutoring services. I even began creating educational content, videos, and blog posts aimed at helping students improve their study habits. The results were staggering. My business began to attract people from all over the world. I started getting clients from different countries, and that's when I realized the full potential of an online business. It wasn't just local anymore. It was global. I hired a small team of tutors to help me manage the growing demand, and I started expanding my services to include more subjects and specialized courses. But with growth came new challenges. I had to figure out how to manage my time, how to handle customer service at scale, and how to ensure that the quality of my services never slipped. I also had to keep up with the competition, which was fierce. There were hundreds of online tutoring services out there, and I had to make sure mine stood out. I focused on offering personalized attention, building strong relationships with my clients, and constantly improving my courses. It paid off. 2 years into running my business, I hit a major milestone. I was making more than 6 figures a year, and I had become my own boss. I had built something from the ground up, something that was sustainable and profitable. But even with all the success, I knew the journey wasn't over. There was always more to learn, more to do, and more people to help. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. From a person who felt trapped in a dead-end job, I've transformed into a business owner with a team of employees and clients across the globe. There were times when I thought I would fail, when I thought I wasn't cut out for this. But those moments taught me resilience. They taught me that success isn't a straight path. It's full of twists, turns, and obstacles. The key is to keep going, even when it feels like nothing is working. Because eventually, if you stick with it, the hard work pays off. Today, I have the freedom to choose how I spend my time. I'm able to travel, take care of my family, and do work that truly makes a difference. And while I'm proud of what I've accomplished, I'm even more excited about what the future holds. I know there will always be new challenges to face, but I'm ready for them. Because when you've built something from nothing, you know that anything is possible. I was 25, broke, and just a few weeks away from having to move back into my parents' house. My friends were getting promotions, buying homes, and starting families. Meanwhile, I was stuck in a dead-end job at a retail store, struggling to pay rent and drowning in credit card debt. I had tried a few side hustles over the years, but none of them ever seemed to work out. Every time I thought I was getting closer to something big, I'd hit a wall, and the dream would slip away. At that point, I was working at a high-end electronics store, selling overpriced gadgets to people who didn't really need them. I'd grown tired of hearing people complain about the latest tech trends and their problems with devices that barely worked out of the box. And then it happened. I had a conversation with a regular customer that changed my life. This guy, let's call him Ben, was a tech enthusiast who worked for a major software company. He came in one day to complain about a particular brand of smart home devices. He said, "These things are supposed to make life easier, but they only complicate things. I need a solution, not a headache." He seemed genuinely frustrated, and I could relate to the feeling of getting excited about something, only to have it fall short. I was just starting to feel the itch to build something for myself, so I thought, what if I could make something that actually worked and made life easier for people? I didn't know the first thing about developing tech products, but I figured, how hard could it be? I had no background in tech, no connections in the industry, and no real funding, but I was determined to figure it out. I started researching. I spent every spare moment learning about smart home devices, how they worked, what people liked, and what they hated. It didn't take long before I realized there was a big gap in the market. No one was offering an easy-to-use, affordable, and reliable smart home hub that actually worked with a wide range of devices. It sounded simple, but I could tell it was a problem worth solving. After a few weeks of research, I decided to dive headfirst into the project. I didn't have any money to spend on development, so I turned to crowdfunding. I created a campaign for my product idea, an affordable smart home hub that could integrate with every major device on the market. I figured that if I could get a few people to back me up, I'd have enough to get started. To my surprise, the campaign took off. Within days, I had hundreds of backers, and the funds kept pouring in. By the end of the month, I had raised enough money to quit my job and devote myself full-time to my project. The problem was, I had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't an engineer, I wasn't a designer, and I definitely wasn't a businessman. But I had the drive and the desire to learn. I spent the next few months teaching myself everything I could about product development, working with manufacturers, and running a startup. I found a couple of freelance engineers who were willing to help me bring my idea to life. But even then, things weren't easy. We ran into roadblocks constantly, from technical glitches to issues with suppliers. The product didn't look as sleek as I had hoped, and the first few prototypes barely worked. I felt like throwing in the towel multiple times, but I kept reminding myself that this was my shot. I eventually had a prototype that worked, barely. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional. So, I went ahead and launched a pre-order campaign to raise more funds for mass production. Again, I was shocked at how well it went. People were excited about my product, and they were willing to wait months for it to ship. That was a huge moment for me. I realized that I had built something that people actually wanted, and that gave me the momentum I needed to push forward. Over the next several months, I worked day and night to get the product ready for launch. The sleepless nights became routine, and the stress was overwhelming. But every small victory, whether it was securing a better supplier or fixing a major software bug, kept me going. My first real breakthrough came when I got my product into the hands of some influential tech bloggers. Their reviews were overwhelmingly positive, and my sales exploded. In the following months, my business went from a side hustle to a full-fledged operation. I expanded the product line, hired a small team, and even secured partnerships with major retailers to sell my products. But, like every entrepreneur, I faced a new set of challenges. I had to navigate the complexities of scaling, managing a team, and keeping customers happy while continuing to innovate. Despite all the success, I made plenty of mistakes. One of the biggest was underestimating how much money I needed for inventory. I had to take out a small loan to cover the costs, and that was a stressful period. There were times when I wasn't sure if I'd be able to pay my team or get the next batch of products in time for the holidays. But somehow, we always made it work. I kept reinvesting the profits into growing the business, and slowly, we began to thrive. Now, just 3 years later, I'm running a business that's worth over $10 million, and I've completely turned my life around. I'm no longer struggling to make rent, and I've hired a full-time team that helps me with everything from product development to marketing. What started as a frustrated conversation with a customer in a retail store has turned into something I never imagined possible. The biggest lesson I learned through all of this is that success doesn't come easy. There were times when I wanted to quit, when I thought I was in way over my head, but I pushed through. If there's one thing I've realized, it's that persistence is key. I didn't have the perfect plan. I didn't have unlimited resources, and I didn't have any guarantees. But I had something more valuable: belief in myself and a willingness to keep learning and adapting. If you're reading this and you're stuck or feeling discouraged, know that I've been there. Starting from scratch is hard, and the road is filled with setbacks. But if you keep pushing forward, learn from your mistakes, and stay committed to your vision, anything is possible. Keep going. I had always been the kind of person who was constantly looking for the next big thing, the next opportunity, the next idea that could change everything. But at the time, I was working a regular 9-to-5 job in a marketing agency, just like everyone else. I had dreams of becoming my own boss, but I never thought it was possible. Until one day, it all changed. It started with a random conversation I had with an old friend at a bar. We hadn't talked in years, but we had always been close in high school. He was now running a small but successful e-commerce business selling niche home decor items. He had a few employees, and the business was growing steadily. We caught up over drinks, and as the night wore on, he started telling me about his experience running the business. "I always knew I wanted to work for myself," he said, his face lighting up. "But I had no idea how hard it would be. The first 2 years were brutal: sleepless nights, endless stress, and constant doubts. But now, I can't imagine doing anything else." His words struck a chord with me. I had always dreamed of having my own business, but I had never considered e-commerce as a viable option. I had a decent amount of savings, and while I wasn't a tech expert, I had a good understanding of digital marketing and trends. I thought maybe I could take a shot at starting my own business, even though I had no experience running one. The next day, I began researching e-commerce. I spent hours reading articles, watching videos, and listening to podcasts about how to start an online business. One thing became clear: it wasn't going to be easy, but it didn't matter. I was ready to take the plunge. I spent the next few weeks brainstorming different ideas for products. I wanted something that was niche but had a strong demand. After a lot of trial and error, I stumbled upon an idea: customized pet accessories. I knew there was a huge pet market, and people were always looking for unique, personalized items for their furry friends. I decided to focus on custom pet collars, leashes, and tags, with the ability for customers to add their pets' names or a special design. The next step was to set up my online store. I went with Shopify because it seemed like the easiest and most affordable option for someone just starting out. I spent a weekend designing the website, adding product images, and writing descriptions. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. I also created social media accounts and started posting cute pictures of dogs wearing my products. I knew that social media would be key to building brand awareness and attracting customers. With everything set up, I officially launched my store. I'll never forget the first order I received. It was a feeling I can't fully describe: surreal and thrilling all at once. Someone had actually purchased my product. I was ecstatic, but I also knew that one sale wasn't enough. I needed to keep the momentum going. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I invested more time into social media marketing, running Facebook and Instagram ads targeting pet owners. I also reached out to influencers in the pet niche, offering to send them free products in exchange for a shout-out. Slowly but surely, my store started gaining traction. Sales were coming in, and I could see the potential for growth. However, things weren't always smooth sailing. I quickly learned that running an e-commerce business was no walk in the park. Fulfillment was a huge headache. At first, I was handling everything myself, packaging orders, printing shipping labels, and dropping them off at the post office. It took up so much time, and I was quickly burning out. I knew I needed help, so I hired a part-time assistant to help with fulfillment. As the business grew, so did the challenges. I had to find suppliers who could meet the demand and keep quality high. There were moments when I felt overwhelmed, questioning whether I could handle it all. There were days when sales dipped, and I wondered if it was all worth it. But every time I thought about quitting, I reminded myself why I started in the first place. By the 6-month mark, my business was turning a profit. I was working 10 to 12 hours a day, but it didn't feel like work. I was building something from the ground up, and it was exciting. I reinvested the profits into growing the business further, hiring more employees, expanding the product line, and improving the website. I also started scaling my marketing efforts by exploring new channels, like Google Ads and influencer partnerships. It wasn't long before I realized the power of automation. I started using email marketing to keep customers engaged and encourage repeat purchases. I also implemented a referral program, offering discounts for customers who referred their friends. Little by little, I was able to step away from the day-to-day operations and focus on scaling the business. Fast forward to a year later, and my small online store had turned into a full-fledged e-commerce brand. I had employees managing customer service, fulfillment, and marketing, and I was overseeing the entire operation. My business was making 6 figures in revenue, and I had the freedom to do what I loved. I was no longer tied to a desk at a marketing agency. I was my own boss, and it felt amazing. But it wasn't just about the money or the success. It was about the journey, the late nights, the failures, the lessons learned. I had built something from scratch, and I was proud of what I had accomplished. I had taken a risk, and it had paid off. Looking back, I realized how much my mindset had changed over the course of that year. When I first started, I was terrified of failure. I had doubts and fears that I wasn't good enough. But as I navigated the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, I became more confident in my ability to solve problems and make decisions. I had learned to embrace the uncertainty and keep pushing forward, no matter what. Today, my business continues to grow, and I'm working on expanding into new markets and product categories. It hasn't always been easy, but it has been worth it. I'm living proof that if you're willing to take risks, work hard, and keep learning, you can achieve things you never thought possible. I'm not saying it will be easy for everyone, but it's definitely possible. So, if you're thinking about starting your own business, don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect idea. Just start. You'll make mistakes, and things won't always go as planned, but that's part of the process. Just keep moving forward, and eventually, you'll find success. It's not about being perfect, it's about being persistent. It's funny how life has a way of surprising you. I was 28, just another cog in the corporate machine, working a 9-to-5 job that I absolutely hated. I was working as a marketing associate at a mid-sized tech company, and if I'm being honest, I didn't care about the product or the company. I was there because it paid the bills. I was stuck in a routine, my head down, doing what I had to do to keep the job. I had always been interested in business, though. I'd always dreamed of being my own boss, owning something that I could truly be passionate about. But like a lot of people, I didn't know where to start. I had no idea what kind of business I would run. What kind of market could I break into that hadn't already been dominated by bigger players? How could I compete with people who had more resources, better connections, and years of experience? It was 2019 when I finally decided to take the leap. I was sitting at my desk, mindlessly scrolling through Instagram, when I came across an ad for a smart home device. It was a voice-activated gadget that could control lights, locks, and security cameras, and I thought, that's a cool product. But then it hit me. I had spent hours, days, and weeks trying to make sense of all the smart home tech in my own apartment. The setups were always confusing, the apps never worked seamlessly, and even the so-called easy-to-use devices weren't so easy. That's when the idea clicked. What if I could create a smart home product that wasn't just for tech enthusiasts, but for everyone? Something intuitive, something that didn't require hours of setup or an advanced degree to operate. I didn't have a background in tech, but I had something that was perhaps even more valuable: frustration and the desire to solve a problem. So, I started brainstorming. I spent the next several weeks researching smart home products, consumer complaints, and everything I could learn about the market. I was determined to create a product that would make it easier for people like me, busy professionals, parents, non-techies, to make their homes smarter without the headache. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but I wanted to make it work better. The idea was simple: create a smart home hub that could seamlessly connect all devices in one app with zero complicated steps. No programming, no setup nightmares, just a plug-and-play system. It would have to be affordable, sleek, and compatible with all the major platforms: Amazon Alexa, Google Home, and Apple's HomeKit. The problem was, I had no idea how to make this thing happen. I didn't know how to design a product or code software, and I certainly didn't have the funds to bring a physical product to life. I felt stuck. But then I had another thought: crowdfunding. I had seen successful campaigns for gadgets and products I'd never imagined people would fund, and if they could do it, so could I. I started sketching out my ideas for a prototype, and in the evenings after work, I began researching how to run a successful crowdfunding campaign. I learned about creating compelling video pitches, setting up rewards for backers, and how to leverage social media for exposure. My nights were filled with work on the product and the campaign, but I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just a pipe dream anymore. This was happening. Fast forward 2 months, and I had enough to launch my crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter. I spent weeks perfecting the video, the product description, and the images. I didn't have much of a marketing budget, so I relied on organic outreach, social media, forums, and personal networks. The first few days of the campaign were slow. I wasn't sure if I was going to make the goal, but I kept pushing. I posted about the product on Reddit, Facebook, and even reached out to a few tech bloggers to see if they'd be willing to share my campaign. And then, it happened. I got an email from a popular tech influencer. He had checked out my campaign and wanted to feature it in one of his YouTube videos. I was ecstatic. This was exactly the kind of exposure I needed. After his video went live, my Kickstarter campaign exploded. Backers flooded in. I had reached my goal within a few days, and I knew there was no turning back. But even with the funding, I was far from in the clear. I still had to develop the product, manage manufacturing, and deliver on my promises. The stress was overwhelming. I had no idea what I was doing. I had to learn everything from sourcing materials to negotiating with manufacturers to logistics and customer service. My full-time job was demanding, but I found myself working nights and weekends on my startup. I was living on caffeine, barely getting any sleep, and wondering if I had bitten off more than I could chew. As the months went by, the challenges didn't stop. The first round of prototypes came in, and they were nothing like what I had imagined. The device didn't work as intended, and it looked cheap. I was crushed. I wanted to give up, but something inside me told me to keep going. I contacted my manufacturer, explained the issues, and asked for revisions. It took months, but we eventually got it right. Every time something went wrong, I learned from it and moved forward. Then came the launch. My first batch of devices finally shipped, and I held my breath, waiting for feedback. To my amazement, customers loved it. It wasn't perfect, but it was a solid product that made life easier. The sales started to trickle in, and eventually, I had a steady stream of orders. The feeling of seeing my product in people's homes, being used, and knowing I had solved a real problem was indescribable. I had made it. 3 years later, my company is now a 6-figure business. We've expanded our product line, and we've made improvements to the original design. I hired a small team, and we're even looking at expanding into new markets. I've learned more than I ever could have imagined and have grown both personally and professionally. I'm still amazed by how far I've come. I went from a frustrated employee working a job I hated to a full-time entrepreneur with my own business. There were days when I thought I was crazy for pursuing this, but looking back now, I wouldn't change a thing. To anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple: just start. You don't need to have it all figured out from the beginning. You don't need a big budget or fancy connections. All you need is a willingness to learn, a drive to succeed, and the persistence to keep going, even when everything seems to be falling apart. If I can do it, so can you. It all started with a simple idea. A lot of people talk about how great their ideas are, but rarely do they mention the fear that creeps in as you stare at your bank account, hoping it won't hit zero before your big breakthrough. That was me in 2017. I was in my mid-20s, living in a tiny apartment in a bustling city, working at a tech startup where the hustle was real, but the pay was just enough to cover rent and the occasional pizza. I was in the rat race, and it felt like every day I was running faster just to stay in place. At the time, I had no idea how to leave my job, let alone start my own business. But that all changed one rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had just finished working on a project for the company, something I'd put all my energy into for weeks, only for my manager to tell me that another team was taking over. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. I couldn't do it anymore. The idea of working my life away for someone else's dream was unbearable. I had always been fascinated with coffee. Not just the drink, but the entire culture around it. I grew up in a small town, where the local coffee shop was the heartbeat of the community. It wasn't just a place to get caffeine. It was where ideas were exchanged, where people gathered, and where I'd often sit for hours, sketching and brainstorming. That was the seed. One day, as I stood in line at my local coffee shop, I had a realization. What if I could create a coffee brand that was different, something that people would feel a connection to? Something that didn't just serve a product, but created an experience? I knew it wouldn't be easy. I had no money to start a business, no formal business education, and most importantly, no experience in the coffee industry. But I had something better than all of those: determination. I didn't care about the risk. I just knew I had to try. The first step was simple: research. I spent every free moment reading everything I could about coffee, from how it's grown to how it's roasted and brewed. I watched videos on YouTube, read blogs, and listened to podcasts. It was an obsession. Soon enough, I learned that there was a growing market for specialty coffee, particularly among millennials who were tired of the big chains and wanted something more authentic and personal. This was the opportunity one was looking for. I didn't have the money to rent a storefront or buy fancy equipment, so I started small. I found a local coffee roaster willing to let me buy beans in bulk. Then I went to work. I spent hours perfecting my blends, experimenting with different flavors, and trying to figure out how to make my brand stand out. I created a simple logo, set up an Instagram page, and started reaching out to local influencers. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to create a community around my coffee, something that felt special. So, I started hosting small, free coffee tasting events at parks, inviting people to come, sip, and chat. Slowly, but surely, people started talking about my brand. They loved the story behind it, and they loved the product. After a few months of grinding away, pun intended, I saved enough money to launch my online store. I had no idea how to do it, but with the help of a friend who was a web designer, I built a simple website and started selling bags of my coffee. The sales weren't huge, but they were enough to cover my costs and give me the confidence that I was onto something. It wasn't fast, but it was progress. Then came the turning point. One day, I received a message from a local coffee shop owner who had heard about my brand. He wanted to meet. I was nervous, to say the least. I had never pitched my product to anyone before. When we sat down, I was honest. I told him that I was just starting out, that I was still figuring everything out, but that I truly believed in what I was doing. To my surprise, he took a chance on me. He placed a small order, and within a week, I was supplying coffee to his shop. That was the moment everything changed. Having my coffee in a real business was validation. It wasn't just me and my friends enjoying it anymore. People were drinking it, and they liked it. From there, the business grew slowly but steadily. I started reaching out to more coffee shops, small businesses, and even local farmers markets. With every new account, my confidence grew. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. But even as the business grew, I kept my focus on quality and community. I never wanted to become just another coffee company. I wanted to be a brand people connected with, a brand that felt authentic and personal. I began using my platform to give back, organizing charity events and collaborating with local artists and businesses. My brand wasn't just about coffee, it was about building a culture around it. By 2019, I had expanded to a small storefront of my own. It was a modest space, but it was mine. It was the fulfillment of a dream I'd never dared to believe could come true. But I wasn't satisfied. I kept pushing. We started offering new products, from merchandise to limited edition blends. My coffee was now sold in multiple states, and I had a small but loyal team helping me run the business. Things were looking up, but with growth came new challenges. The pressure to maintain quality while scaling up became intense. I had to learn to delegate more and trust my team. I had to learn how to manage cash flow and how to handle the logistics of running a business that was growing faster than I could have ever imagined. I learned about inventory management, contracts, and how to deal with difficult customers. There were moments where I felt like I was drowning, but I always remembered why I started this journey. I didn't want to be stuck in a job I hated. I wanted to build something meaningful. Fast forward to today, and my business is doing better than I ever expected. I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm thriving. The company has expanded into several new cities, and we've launched a subscription service that ships our coffee directly to customers. We've been featured in several major magazines, and I'm regularly invited to speak at industry events. But the best part? I've created a team that believes in the vision, and we're all working together towards something bigger than just selling coffee. It hasn't been easy, and I've faced setbacks, failures, and moments of doubt. But I wouldn't trade any of it for the world. The key to success wasn't having a big idea or even a ton of money. It was having the courage to take that first step and the persistence to keep going, no matter what. If you've got an idea, don't wait for the perfect moment. Start now. Learn as you go. And never give up on your dreams. I never thought I'd become an entrepreneur. Growing up, I wasn't the type of kid who sold lemonade or had a side hustle at school. I came from a modest family, where the idea of owning a business seemed like a distant dream. My parents were immigrants who worked hard just to keep food on the table. They always encouraged me to pursue a stable job, a safe career. Get into a good college, get a good degree, and get a job with benefits. That was the dream for us. I did all the right things. Graduated high school with honors, went to college on a scholarship, and landed a job as an analyst at a major financial firm right out of graduation. I thought I had it made. I was on the path my parents had dreamed for me. I was secure. I had benefits, a 401k, and what seemed like a promising future. But then, everything changed. It was subtle at first. I started to feel like something was missing. My days were filled with spreadsheets, reports, and meetings that, after a while, felt meaningless. I was part of a system that, no matter how much I worked, would never really appreciate my efforts. The work was transactional. Do your job, collect your paycheck, and go home. Rinse and repeat. The idea of waking up every day to the same grind for the next 40 years started to feel suffocating. I'd sit at my desk, watching the clock tick, and feel an increasing sense of dissatisfaction. One day, I overheard a conversation between two colleagues. They were talking about side hustles and how they were making extra money outside of work by flipping products online, renting properties, and investing in stocks. I had never really considered doing anything outside of my 9 to 5. The thought of taking on extra work was exhausting, but something about the conversation sparked a curiosity in me. I started researching, reading about people who had built businesses from scratch. Entrepreneurs who had started with little to no money and turned their ideas into million-dollar empires. It was in the middle of this research that I stumbled across a story that stuck with me. A guy had quit his job in finance to start an e-commerce business. He was selling products online, and in just 2 years, he had built a 6-figure income. He wasn't doing anything revolutionary, just selling stuff on platforms like Amazon and eBay. But the idea of creating a business that was flexible, scalable, and potentially profitable without being tied to a desk was enticing. For months, I was torn. I knew the stability of my job was hard to leave behind, but I couldn't shake the idea of starting something for myself. The fear of failure was paralyzing. What if it didn't work? What if I failed and ended up with nothing? But the thought of staying in my current situation was even worse. I felt trapped. So, after endless nights of soul-searching, I made a decision. I wasn't going to quit my job immediately, but I was going to start small on the side. I didn't have a lot of savings, but I could scrape together enough for a small initial investment. I chose to start with a dropshipping business. It was an easy entry point with relatively low upfront costs. I found a niche that I was passionate about, fitness gear, and set up an online store. The first few months were rough. I spent countless hours learning about marketing, optimizing my website, and running Facebook ads. I made mistakes along the way, wrong product choices, bad ad campaigns, you name it, but each failure taught me something valuable. The breakthrough came when I managed to make my first sale. It wasn't much, just a small order for a set of resistance bands, but it was enough to give me hope. I knew then that I could make this work. Over the next few months, I poured more time and energy into refining my business. I learned more about customer service, email marketing, and how to manage inventory. Slowly, the sales started to trickle in. I remember the first time I woke up to multiple orders overnight. It was surreal. I had done it. I had built something that people actually wanted to buy. As my side business grew, I realized I was no longer content with my 9-to-5 job. The financial firm where I worked was holding me back. The more I invested in my business, the less interested I became in my corporate role. My entrepreneurial spirit had been ignited, and I knew I couldn't go back to the life of mediocrity I had before. Eventually, I reached a point where my side hustle was earning more than my day job. It wasn't an overnight success, but after 2 years of sleepless nights and endless work, I was making enough money to leave my full-time job. I remember the day I handed in my resignation letter. It was a mix of fear and exhilaration. I was finally taking control of my life. The safety net was gone, and it was just me, my business, and the unknown future ahead. The transition was not easy. There were months of uncertainty, times when I doubted myself, and struggles that I hadn't anticipated. I wasn't ready for the emotional toll it would take. Entrepreneurship is not a smooth ride. It's full of ups and downs. There were times when I thought about quitting and going back to my stable job, but I reminded myself of why I started. I had a vision, and it was bigger than any fear or obstacle that came my way. I eventually expanded my business and diversified into different areas. I started creating my own products, building a brand, and even hiring a small team to help with operations. Today, my business is generating 7 figures in revenue, and I have the freedom to work on my terms. I've learned more about myself in the past few years than I ever did working for someone else. The journey hasn't been easy, but it has been incredibly rewarding. Looking back, I realized that entrepreneurship wasn't something I chose. It was something that chose me. I never saw myself as a risk taker, but once I made the leap, I discovered a part of myself I never knew existed. It's been a journey of self-discovery, growth, and most importantly, taking control of my own future. I still think about my parents and the dreams they had for me, and while I know they were just trying to protect me, I hope they understand why I chose this path. It's not about money or success. It's about living a life that I'm proud of. If there's one thing I've learned along the way, it's that entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It's a journey full of uncertainty, risk, and sacrifice. But it's also one of the most rewarding things you can do. If you have a dream, don't wait for the perfect time. Start now. Fail. Learn. Grow. And above all, never give up. Because you never know what could happen if you just take that first step. I never thought I'd end up here. If you told me 5 years ago that I'd be running a successful business from the comfort of my home, I would have laughed hard. But looking back now, I can pinpoint exactly when everything changed for me, and it all started with a single, seemingly insignificant decision. 5 years ago, I was stuck. I had a good job in marketing, a decent salary, and a nice little apartment in the city. On paper, everything seemed perfect. But inside, I was miserable. My job felt like a dead end. My daily routine was draining, and I constantly dreamed of something more. I kept telling myself that I was just being ungrateful, that I should be thankful for what I had. But the truth was, I was craving freedom. I wanted to build something of my own, something that had meaning and purpose. But the question was, what? I had no idea what kind of business I could start. I wasn't a tech genius, I didn't have a lot of capital to invest, and I certainly wasn't an expert in any particular field. I did what many people in my position do. I spent my free time browsing the internet, reading about success stories, hoping to find inspiration. It wasn't until I came across an article about a woman who built a business around selling custom t-shirts online that something clicked. Her story wasn't extraordinary, but it was relatable. She didn't have any special skills or deep knowledge of fashion. She started small, built a brand, and grew it over time. She used platforms like Etsy, social media, and simple marketing strategies to get her business off the ground. And the best part? She didn't need a huge upfront investment. I decided to give it a shot. I didn't have any experience in e-commerce, but I figured it was worth trying. I started by researching everything I could about print-on-demand services and e-commerce platforms. I learned about Shopify, Etsy, and Printful, a print-on-demand service that allowed me to design and sell custom products without ever having to handle inventory or shipping. This was key because I didn't have the money or space to store products. I spent weeks designing shirts, mugs, and hoodies, experimenting with different logos and slogans that I thought might resonate with people. At first, I was unsure about the designs. I didn't know if they were good enough to sell, but I had nothing to lose. I put everything together and launched my first shop on Etsy. The first few weeks were discouraging. I barely made any sales. I was spending hours on social media, posting about my new store, trying to connect with potential customers, and nobody seemed to care. I remember feeling like I had made a huge mistake, that I was wasting my time. But instead of giving up, I doubled down. I kept improving my designs, worked on my marketing, and started running small ads on Instagram and Facebook. Then, one day it happened. I got my first sale. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. And that was the turning point. I realized that I was onto something. The more I learned about marketing, the better I got at it. I started analyzing my ads, figuring out which designs sold best, and tweaking my product offerings. Slowly but surely, the orders started coming in. Within 6 months, I had made enough money to quit my full-time job and focus on my business. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was enough to cover my living expenses and give me the freedom to work on my own terms. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to take a risk. I had been selling on Etsy for about a year and was making a steady income. However, I knew that relying on one platform wasn't a sustainable long-term strategy. If something happened to Etsy, if their algorithms changed or my account got flagged, I could lose everything. I wanted to own my business more, so I decided to launch my own website. Building a website was intimidating at first. I had no experience with coding or web design, and the thought of learning something new felt overwhelming. But I was determined. I started using Shopify and watched countless tutorials on how to create a store that would attract customers. I spent weeks getting everything set up, from writing product descriptions to choosing the right payment gateways. When I finally launched my website, I was terrified. What if nobody visited? What if it was a complete flop? But to my surprise, my existing customers started finding me through Google, and the traffic grew steadily. The sales didn't come pouring in immediately, but I was able to keep the momentum going by running targeted Facebook and Instagram ads. By the time I had been in business for 2 years, I was no longer just selling shirts and mugs. I expanded my product line to include custom phone cases, tote bags, and even home decor items. I started building an email list and offering discounts to customers who subscribed. And the more I learned about SEO, the better my website performed. Slowly, I was getting more organic traffic, and I could see my sales numbers steadily increasing. Looking back, there were plenty of moments when I thought about giving up. There were times when I felt like I was spinning my wheels, times when my sales dropped unexpectedly, and times when I doubted myself. But what kept me going was the belief that I was building something real, something that could provide the freedom and flexibility I had always dreamed of. Fast forward to today, and my business is thriving. I'm no longer a one-person operation. I've hired a small team to help with design, customer service, and marketing. I've expanded into international markets, and I've even started collaborating with influencers to reach new customers. What started as a small idea in my apartment has grown into a full-fledged brand, and I'm constantly amazed at how far I've come. But even now, I don't take it for granted. I still work hard every day to improve my products and my marketing. The entrepreneurial journey is never easy, and it's certainly not a straight line. There are always challenges to overcome, but I've learned to embrace the ups and downs. What I've discovered is that success isn't about having a perfect idea from the start. It's about being persistent, staying adaptable, and taking calculated risks. If there's one piece of advice I could give to anyone thinking about starting their own business, it's this: just start. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you have everything figured out. Take that first step and keep moving forward. The road will be tough, but if you're determined, the rewards are worth it. Now, when I look at where I am today, I realize that all those years of feeling stuck were actually preparing me for this moment. I had to go through the struggle, the uncertainty, and the self-doubt to build the resilience needed to run a successful business. And even though the journey isn't over, I'm proud of how far I've come. I guess I've learned that sometimes the best decisions are the ones you make when you have no idea what the outcome will be. You just have to trust that, no matter what, you'll figure it out. It was the summer of 2014, and I was sitting at a dusty desk in my tiny apartment, staring at a cluttered whiteboard covered in scribbled ideas. I had always been passionate about technology, but it wasn't until the last few years that I really started diving into the world of startups and entrepreneurship. At this point, I had tried a few ventures that didn't quite take off, but I had learned valuable lessons along the way. This new idea, however, felt different. It was something that could not only provide a solution, but also disrupt an entire industry. I had just finished a 6-month stint at a tech startup, where I had learned a lot about the way businesses scaled. Yet, something kept gnawing at me. I felt like I was getting further away from the core thing that I loved, creating something out of nothing. The job wasn't bad, but I knew I had bigger aspirations. The idea came to me while I was reading a tech blog about artificial intelligence. The article was about how AI had the potential to revolutionize the way we interacted with technology. But there was one problem. Most AI tools were either too expensive for small businesses to integrate or far too complicated for anyone who wasn't an expert to use. I immediately saw an opportunity. What if I could build an AI-powered platform that was affordable, user-friendly, and easy to integrate into existing businesses? I thought it was a golden idea, but as soon as I shared it with my friends, I realized how naive I was. Everyone told me I was crazy, and they made it clear that the market was already flooded with competitors. But deep down, I knew something they didn't. I knew that there was room for a solution that wasn't just another AI tool. It had to be something simple, approachable, and scalable for any business, no matter how small. I spent the next few weeks diving headfirst into market research. I researched AI, how businesses could benefit from it, and what made existing tools so difficult to use. My apartment became a war room of whiteboards, notes, and half-drunk cups of coffee. I was working nonstop, barely sleeping, just chasing that elusive sense of having an idea that could change everything. By the end of July, I had a plan in place. I decided I would build a platform that allowed small businesses to easily use AI without needing to be tech-savvy or have huge capital to invest. It would be a subscription-based service with easy-to-use templates that could be customized to suit the specific needs of each business. The next step was finding developers. I had some savings left, but it wasn't much, so I reached out to a couple of freelance developers I knew from my previous work. I pitched them the idea, and to my surprise, they were on board. One of them, Sarah, had been working in AI for years and was skeptical at first, but after a few meetings, she saw the potential. The development was slow at first. It felt like every step forward was followed by 2 steps back. The platform's AI was nowhere near as intuitive as I envisioned, and it seemed like every bug fix led to new problems. But we kept pushing through. I spent countless nights debugging code, refining our user interface, and researching the best ways to explain complex AI concepts to people who had no technical background. It was exhausting, but the idea kept me going. In December, we had our first prototype. It was rough, clunky, even, but it worked. We tested it on a few small businesses in my network, and the feedback was surprisingly positive. Of course, there were bugs, and the interface wasn't perfect, but the core functionality was there. Businesses saw immediate improvements in efficiency, and the AI tools helped them automate mundane tasks, freeing up their time for more important work. We had built something that worked. With a functional prototype in hand, I began thinking about how to get the word out. I didn't have a marketing budget, and the competition was fierce. But I knew that if I could find a way to leverage word of mouth, we could start building momentum. So, I focused all my energy on networking. I reached out to small business owners, offered free trials, and asked for feedback. I made cold calls to local businesses and pitched them the benefits of our platform. It wasn't easy. Most people didn't even answer the phone, but eventually, we started getting some traction. One of the businesses that tried our platform was a local bakery that had been struggling to keep up with orders. They were able to use our platform to automate their inventory management and predict demand. As a result, they saw a noticeable improvement in sales and efficiency. By the end of January, we had our first paying customer. It wasn't a big deal, but to me, it was everything. It was proof that the idea had potential and that people were willing to pay for the value we provided. I was ecstatic. The first month of sales was modest, but it was enough to cover our basic expenses, and that felt like a huge win. As the months went by, we continued to improve the platform. We refined the AI algorithms, made the user interface more intuitive, and began offering additional features like automated marketing tools and customer support chatbots. The business slowly started to grow, but it wasn't until we hit a critical milestone in late 2015 that everything began to take off. We were featured in a major tech blog that had a huge following. Suddenly, our platform was in the spotlight, and the leads came pouring in. I was overwhelmed, but I was also ready. With a solid product and a growing customer base, we began to scale. I hired more developers, a marketing team, and even a few customer support agents. The business was no longer just a side project. It was becoming a legitimate company. Looking back, I realize how much of a roller coaster it's been. There were so many moments of doubt, failure, and frustration. But every setback was just another lesson, another chance to pivot and improve. Today, our company serves thousands of small businesses around the world, helping them use AI to grow and succeed. We've raised multiple rounds of funding, expanded our team, and built a reputation as one of the most user-friendly AI platforms in the market. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth every second. I'm proud of what we've built, and I'm even more excited for the future. There are still challenges ahead, but I know one thing for sure. If you're willing to take risks, learn from your mistakes, and keep pushing forward, anything is possible. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.